Alright guys, so here's what could potentially be the cheapest titanium GMT watch out, or at least that I'm aware of anyway. If you know any others, let me know down in the comments. So this is the Boderry Admiral GMT. So I've actually reviewed a few of their watches now. I think I was one of the first to review them about 4 years ago. So I'll leave a link to the playlist down in the description so you can check them out if you want. So quickly pop the watch to one side for a second, and I'll briefly show you the packaging they're using now. So they've got rid of that plastic shipping container look. They've just gone for a simple box. Does the job, nothing too fancy. But we'll get this out of the way now and get right down to the watch. And here it is. So you can see it's not the most original of designs, definitely taking inspiration from a few different places. But as I said before, it's actually a titanium watch as well, and we've actually got the NH34 movement in this. So I'm going to actually mention the price early on with this one, because it is that impressive I think. And I've also got a discount code as well, so you can get it even cheaper. So without the discount code, it's $169, £130, €155. But if you use the discount code Admiral15, you can get 15% off, and that brings the price down to $143, £110, €131. But obviously you'll want to know more about the watch than just that, so we'll go over the dimensions to begin with. So it's actually listed as 40mm on the website, but I'm measuring it at 40.7. Then we've got a thickness of 12.8, lug width of 20, and then the all-important lug to lug is coming in at 49.1, but we do actually have male end links on this. So if you include them, the measurement's more like 53mm. So as I say, it will wear larger than you'd expect, but I'll show you that later on. I definitely would have preferred if it had female end links. So when it comes to the weight on this supply bracelet, with all the links included, it's coming at 117 grams, and then size for my 7-inch wrist, it's coming at about 110. And that is the beauty of titanium. So seeing as we're talking about it, let's take a closer look at that bracelet and start with the clasp. So we're going to zoom in on that so you can see it properly. So you can see we've got the Boderry branding on there, but it is a little unusual that we don't have a dive style clasp with it being a diver. And because of this style of clasp, that means we don't have any micro adjust unfortunately, which is a bit of a shame. So when it comes to sizing, you're just going to have to do it by removing these links. Thankfully they are quite small, and then we've got double pushers, and then we've got the mill clasp in there. But we've actually got some text on this. So it actually says stainless steel / titanium. I imagine that's because the mechanism on this is probably going to be made of mainly stainless steel bits. But according to the listing, the bracelet and the case are both titanium though. And now you can see we've got that pretty nice case back as well, with that star on there. Do really like this extra little bit of detail, which you don't always get on cheaper watches. A lot of the time they're just plain. And then when it comes to the text, we've just got Boderry A12 GMT, titanium, 200 meters. And it is a screw down case back as well, albeit not the easiest of the types to get off. But now let's move on to the head of the watch and talk about that in a bit more detail. So as I said, this is also titanium, so it's pretty plainly finished, fully brushed, nothing too fancy, but it's nicely done. No polished chamfered details or anything. And then we've got that signed crown there with the Boderry logo as well. And you can see there, we've got the difference in finishing on the bracelet, the polished centre section. And you can also see as well, that crystal is completely flat, no curvature to it all. We'll be checking in a bit if it is sapphire. But before we do that, let's take a look at the dial. So there's a couple of little differences between this black dial version and the white dial one. So they're mainly when it comes to the indices and the hands. On this black dial version, they're completely white. On the white dial version, they have a black surround on them, on the indices and the hands. So it's just printed branding at the top, and the text down at the bottom with the GMT, automatic, 200 meters, 660 feet. And when it comes to the hands, we've got nice proportions on all of them. And we've got that red GMT hand matching the red GMT text. I also like the way they've integrated the date at the 4 o'clock, where it kind of blends in and almost looks like one of the indices, especially on this black dial version. I think on the white one it doesn't look as good, because that doesn't have the black surround as it does on the indices. With that one I think it would have looked good if they just put a little black border around the edge of the date window, just to get it to blend in a bit better. But as I say, this one I think it looks really good. And the only other thing on the dial is that printed minute track around the outside. But you're probably wondering now, is that crystal on there actually sapphire? So let's check that out now and find out. Using the trusty diamond selector tool. And yep, we have got sapphire crystal. So it's good to see, especially at this kind of price. So now getting onto the movement, as I said earlier, this is the NH34, so I'm not going to show you that in detail, you've probably seen it plenty of times before. But we've got a nice screw down crown, still easily accessible, despite having those crown guards as well. And as you've come to expect with the NH34 movements, rock solid, no issues whatsoever. So instead, let's move on to the bezel. So it's a aluminium bezel insert, but we have actually got a 24-click bezel. And it is also bi-directional, so that is good to see. With it being a GMT watch, that is actually really useful. Pretty nice action on it as well. And when it comes to the alignment, you can see there's a tiny little bit of play in it, but you will basically get it lined up nicely. And again, you can see closer now that tiny little bit of play, but it is very minute. And again, if you go for the white dial version, you will get a different colour bezel. I think that one's red and blue. And as you saw when I was using that bezel, I didn't have any issues gripping it or anything. It's nice and grippy, without being sharp as well. But now let's get on to the interesting part with this watch, and that's the lume. So you can see we've got a little bit there already, but let's charge it up, give it a proper chance. And there we go. So initially at least, it's looking really impressive. When it comes to the lume they're actually using though, they don't specify exactly what it is on the listing. It just says Japanese superluminova. So although it's appearing like an ice blue colour on camera, in person it is actually more green. Hopefully the camera will adjust and show that a bit better as we go on. But either way, at least initially, it's looking really good, as I say. No patchiness at all, consistent across the hands, indices and that fully lumed bezel, which is a nice touch. We've even got some lume on the GMT hand and the second hand as well, so that is useful at night. But as always, the question is, what is the longevity like? So let's speed this up now and find out. So, not a lot of change to begin with. But the longer we go on, you will see it is starting to fade fairly quickly, especially those indices, which isn't ideal. If you want something to fade first, you probably prefer the bezel to fade first, but it is the hands and the indices that are fading a little bit quicker. But you can see they are still legible, just not as bright as the bezel. So it's not the best lume I've ever seen, but it's far from the worst. It's definitely better than the likes of Pagani design, but it's certainly not going to last you all night, which is a little bit of a shame. So all that's left to do now is show you what it's like on wrist, go over the pros and cons, and then you can decide whether you want to pick one of these up or not. And here it is on my 7-inch wrist. So, it does wear nicely. I've managed to get a good fit despite this clasp and the lack of micro adjust, but your mileage may vary with that one. I definitely would have preferred to have seen a traditional just dive style clasp. But again, with this kind of style bracelet, with the articulation you've got in it, it does conform to wrist and wear really nicely though. And now it's on wrist, you can also see those male end links, how they stick out a little bit, so it does wear larger than you'd think, which is a bit of a shame. Would have been a lot better if they just used female end links, but I think it works on my 7-inch wrist, but I definitely wouldn't be going smaller than a 7-inch wrist for this one, unless you just plan on swapping out that bracelet anyway for something else. When it comes to the dial, it's really nice and legible, with this black one especially, with the contrast. With that white one, I don't think it's quite as good, but they do have the black surround on the indices and the hands, so it kind of gets around that issue. And as I said earlier, I just think the date window on this one integrates a lot nicer, and overall I just think they've done a really good job with it as well. I do appreciate the bi-directional 24-click bezel, paired with that NH34 movement, and again, the fact that you're getting this with titanium as well, titanium bracelet and case, especially at this price, I think it's a really good deal. The main thing that I would change and improve is that lume though. Just needs some more layers on it to make it actually useful, so it'll last throughout the night. But that's pretty much it in terms of issues. So, as I said, that clasp, I'd prefer to see a dive style clasp. Perhaps you could change that out yourself. And those end links, it would have been better if they'd been female. That being said though, overall, I still think it's a really good deal, especially if you get it for that reduced price using the discount code Admiral15 for the extra 15% off. I think it's a bit of a steal. Or should I say titanium. Sorry, I just couldn't resist. So if you are still interested in picking one up, don't forget to use that discount code and the link down in the description. But that's it for this one guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.